You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hello, JP. Oh, hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. Sabrina. Welcome to our college. And thank you for being here also. We'll wait for the participants to come, then we will start.
Sounds good.
J- JP,
Ma'am, can you just if you can if you need to add the slides, ma'am? So yes, ma'am.
So, should I be sharing the screen or you guys will be doing that?
I've already uploaded the presentation, ma'am. So can you just
Oh,
check if you can?
are you guys able to hear me? See me?
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
It's loading, ma'am.
Yeah. and very good morning to everyone. I welcome you all to today's webinar on sustainable solutions. Design Tree Service Consultants Private Limited has collaborated with us and have put together an amazing series of seminars on various topics related to building services and structure. Design Tree Consultants is a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy company founded in March 2008 by dynamic, innovative professionals to bridge the gap between the ever-changing needs of the construction industry. We are one of the largest providers in South Asia, a consultancy with branches in Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Vijayawada, Chennai, Kolkata, with a relative staff strength of 300 plus. Design Tree provides professional and skills to plan, design, and supervise the construction of wide range of services from concept to delivery, such as civil and structural engineering, public health engineering, fire and life safety systems, electrical engineering, HVAC, IBMS engineering, etc. To begin with, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our very prolific guest for today's webinar. We are honored this morning by the presence of Ms. Nupur, who is a Technical Director of Green Building Solutions Design Management at Design Tree Services Consultancy. Bachelor's of Architecture from Sardar Patel University. She started her career training under the Dori Baka in Kerala, who is renowned for his efficient energy efficiency architecture. She focuses on creating sustainable buildings. In building certification for green buildings for the developer to create sensitive buildings using technology and new materials. Ms. Nupur is an architect with 13 years of in the building industry. She is certified by USGB, IGBC Wellness Institute. She is working in a building using sustainable building technologies. She also has a vast experience the residential projects, which numbers over 20, include Tata Embassy, projects with developers like
Sharanya.
UGB and
Sharanya?
Yes, sir.
I think you may have to switch off your
Yes, sir.
video. Network is a little bad. Your network must be a little weak.
Okay, so you're
Yeah, with the video
okay,
on.
so is it audible?
Yeah, just try now. Try now, please.
Is it audible?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir.
JP?
Yes, sir. So I
Jaypriya.
Yes, sir.
Is Sharanya's voice breaking only for me or is it breaking for everybody?
So it was breaking, sir, but now it is not fine, sir. After she turned off the video, it's fine.
Yeah,
sir.
please. Yeah, just you may continue, please, Sharan.
Yes, sir. So I was introducing architect Nupur, and she is an architect with 13 years of experience in green building industry. And to talk about her experience in the projects, she has 20 plus residential certified projects, including Tata Embassy, L&T reality projects, commercial projects with developers like Prestige, RMZ, CAL for CS rating, both for USGBC and IGBC ratings, and various office interior projects with 40 plus certified CI projects, and 15 of those platinum rated. So that's about Ms. Nupur. She's an eminent and a great architect. Over to you, ma'am, for the presentation.
Thank you so much for those really nice words. Hello, everybody. First off, I'd like to say sincere apologies for making you listen to me on Sunday. But this is where we are. The topic today we have thought of discussing sustainable solutions. And before I get into the topic, I thought let me give my introduction in a slightly different style. In 2002, when I was about to pass out from my college, we had this image of a lonely polar bear floating somewhere on an iceberg that is completely gone, and he is floating just by the weight of his body, and that really hurt me a lot. It pained me. It physically stayed in my head for days and days. And I then decided that I need to do something about it. That I cannot let something like this, something as a beautiful creature like the polar bear, just have such a painful, horrible life. From that day onwards, I started to understand more about the climate crisis. From that day onwards, I started how we can find a way in which all of us can coexist together. In 2011, the news of polar bears dying because of starvation and because they were not able to find food came out in the forefront. That was the year I had my Big Bang 5-day wedding. In 2015, when I was a part of the IPCC's reporting for their annual reports, polar bear were dying due to emancipation. 2019, when me and a bunch of us started a think tank for climate action, Russia ordered a shoot-at-sight order for all polar bears because they had started coming and damaging the infrastructure in their villages and cities. Like we have street dogs who are searching for food and garbage. They had a polar bear problem because there was just no food left for these guys. This is a big problem, and there is a lot that needs to be understood before we even talk about solutioning. So I would like to spend some time with all of us today to understand what climate change is and what actually is the problem. Solutions we can search, but let us first figure out how big and what all the problem entails. The basic structure of this program is more about the problem rather than the solution. To understand climate change, to understand what we are facing, we will have to stop looking at it as an India problem, as a Mangalore problem, as a Karnataka problem. This is a planetary issue. This is an issue that circumvents any and every divide we have between us. It doesn't matter whether you are from Sri Lanka or Bhutan or Pakistan or Netherlands or New Zealand. It's a planetary issue. And the only way we can look at this problem, we can even begin to understand what the problem looks like, is to understand that the planet is an entire single system. It's a complex amalgamation of multiple systems, but all of them come together. All of us would have seen this graphic a lot of times in our schooling years. It basically means that the entire planet is in a state of balance throughout. That means that all our weather, all our wind, sun, everything has found a uniform balance as this Earth makes a rotation around the sun. So for every rotation at every degree or every knot we are from the sun, there is a specific activity that is going to happen on the planet. That specific activity is going to happen for every geographic location. So in my hometown growing up, 7th of June, there used to be the first rain every year. It is almost like an old wives' tale. Ki every 7th of June, barish start hogi. I'm sure if you go back and ask your family, if you ask your parents, they would have a similar saying. Ki 3rd of July, rain starts at our place. In Mangalore, I think you will have your first rain somewhere in 2nd or 3rd of June. The entire planet, the entire climate of the planet moved in a very, very well calibrated clockwork. This is true for not just how rain starts, this is true for how snowfall happens, how snow melt happens, when is summer, when is winter, when is spring, and everything in between. To such an extent that for the last 10,000 years, you could almost spend down to 9,000 years ago, 9,342 years ago, and say this date, this was the weather. For 10,000 years, or maybe let's say 400 generations, we had a very stable environment. That gave us an opportunity to develop a lot as a species. From just living in caves and hunting wild animals, we started agriculture because we could predict when is going to be the monsoon, when can I ensure that my paddy will be harvested, when do I know that the rain will stop and I can start planting my next crop. My entire civilizational ergonomics started developing on this weather pattern. As we started growing up from the 1950s, to be specific, things started changing a little. Things started being different from what we know. So from last 1950, there has been a very strong observation that the weather doesn't follow what we tell it to. Rains don't come on 7th of June. Rains come in May, rains come in January, rain comes whenever they want. They really don't listen to us anymore. And now we are in a little bit of a problem because we don't understand how to survive in this changing or mood tantrums of the nature. The changing weather, thankfully for India, has not been very drastic. So if you look at the globe, the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle, that's your North Pole and South Pole, have had almost 5.6 to 6.3 degrees temperature rise than the normal. Places like your Scandinavian countries, Norway, Finland, Canada, has had up to 1.5 to 2.2 degrees increase. India, thankfully, has been fortunate because we are closer to the equator, where only 0.85 degrees centigrades is the temperature increase. When I say 0.85, that basically means that everything that we know, every weather pattern, every heat wave is going to be 0.85 degree worse than what we understand. A classic and a beautiful example would have been what happened in Canada last week. In a town called Lytton, in very close to the Arctic Circle, the temperature was around 49.6 degrees centigrade. Arctic Circle is not used to 50 degree temperature. Arctic Circle is used to minus 50 degree temperature. Things started getting really crazy and intense there. Apparently, this town of Lytton literally burnt down completely. Like everything was burned down in a matter of few hours. The people there had 10 minutes to run. So if you were brushing your teeth, you had to carry a toothbrush to the car and just run. That is what we are expecting to happen everywhere across the planet, and worse moving forward. There are a lot of complex systems that run around this planet. And if you look at those two globes in the image below, are about something called the polar vortex or the jet streams. Jet streams are basically a very high velocity wind pattern that goes zoom, zoom, zoom at the top of our globe and at the bottom of our globe. They basically keep all the cold air in our poles inside and doesn't let the warm air below go up. That has drastically started changing. All this zoom, zoom of the jet stream is now going all wonky and wobbly. So at places like, for example, in Texas in mid-May, they had a snowstorm because the cold air just came down. And at the same time in Siberia, you had the hot air going up and you had wildfires. This basic change that is happening at a planetary level is going to cause massive destruction to our life, to our civilization as we know it. It's going to cause massive destruction to everything that we hold dear. So when we talk about sustainability, I think it is very important for us to understand that sustainability is not about the polar bear. Sustainability is not about those pandas and the koalas that were running in those Australian wildfires. It simply means our capability, our conscious efforts to not die. That is where we are today at a planetary level. Sustainability is the ability to continue to exist, to be just alive. It is time we start shedding away all the altruism, all the mahanta that we have attributed to environment and to green and to all the other big gizmos people use in this field. Again, before we start talking about solution, let us try to figure out where India has been today. And we as architects, you as upcoming architects, the next adults in the room, need to know what you're going to face. We are at a situation where the iron ore of the country is not going to last more than 30-40 years. The most conservative of estimates says that all the iron ore in India is going to be over in 50 years. How are you guys going to build your beautiful skyscrapers that you have been dreaming about in 50 years? In fact, if iron ore is going to get over in 50 years, maybe the iron would be best suited for pharmaceutical uses and not for construction. Because steel and medical purpose trumps having a new house. If you are thinking of going on a long drive on your 40th or 50th birthday, that might not really be an option for you because all the oil in the world is over in 20 years. You're going to reach peak oil. Peak oil is a concept that basically means the efforts or the energy required to harvest any resource is much higher than it is to than the actual resource is worth. So, for example, if I have to harvest, let's say, 1 liter of crude oil, and this crude oil is going to give me, I don't know, 10 kilojoules of energy. The amount of energy I would require to harvest that 10 kilojoules is going to be drastically more. So it does not make sense for me to put in a lot of efforts to get something very limited in return. So in 20 years, it just doesn't make sense for having an oil refinery because it's not going to make basic physics sense. The iron is going to be over in 30 years. Your coal, one of the most prominent form of energy, even today, has just 80 years. And please note that 80 years means that we are not going to be able to harvest the same amount of coal, but gradually the quality of our resources is going to decline. So from getting, let's say, a very good quality of black gold, as people call it in Australia, we are going to start getting it as grayer and grayer and grayer to an extent where the last bit of coal will have very limited calorific value. Slowly and surely, all the resources that we know are getting extinct, are getting over consumed. Unfortunately, like food, none of these resources can be generated or can be harvested at a manual level. If we talk about green energy, we talk about electric cars, lithium, by 2025, we are going to reach peak lithium. And there is no viable technology, at least till 2035, that we can reuse the lithium that we have already put in our batteries. Cobalt, another 15 years. Phosphorus, that's the main ingredient of our farming, 45 years. Copper, 15 years. Each and every resource that you hold dear to, each and every resource that we assume कि ये तो है ही, ये तो हमें इस्तेमाल ही करना है, वो सब खत्म हो रहा है. We are just losing all the basis of, we are losing all the building blocks on which our civilization has been formed, has created its entire empire. We are losing all the bricks in the game. This is going to put a very interesting spin on what your building materials are going to be moving forward. I would strongly encourage you to ask your structures teacher about how they're going to build without steel. That is just one aspect of what we are looking at, depletion of resources. The other aspect that all of us have faced, all of us are facing and will continue to face. India has had intense heat waves in the last 5 years. In this year itself, I personally have witnessed 3 heat waves when I was staying in Gujarat. Is there anybody here who has not yet witnessed a single heat wave? Who has not yet witnessed a single heat wave in this year? We may be fortunate enough to stay in our AC rooms, but everybody isn't. The monkeys and the trees and the birds and the bees and the butterflies and the cows aren't. We don't have air-conditioned cow sheds. How are you expecting to feed yourself, to nurture yourself, to have an ecosystem when majority of our companions in this planet cannot survive? We also have intense rains. Now, it is very interesting to understand what rains is. Rain basically is all the moisture that gets evaporated from the ocean, gets collected at your stratosphere level, at your cloud level around 10 to 15 kilometers above the ground, and it starts cooling because the temperature there is cooler. As it starts cooling, this moisture then converts back into water droplets, and eventually, as they come on the landfall, they start coming down. Now, once these water droplets, once these water droplets form clouds, and these clouds form a pattern, wind will, I'm so sorry, my dog would like to join us in the presentation. Once these clouds are formed, because of these jet streams and Gulf streams, we have a predicted pattern of rainfall. Now, I'm sure all of us understand or know that as you put in more heat, the amount of moisture that is created increases. As we put in 8.85 degrees centigrades of temperature in our Indian Ocean, that is 0.85 degrees centigrade worth of humidity that is going to come up. That means 0.85 degrees centigrade worth of moisture is going to come down. So in the first 3 weeks of monsoon, the first 3 weeks of June itself, 171% extra rainfall. That's almost double the rainfall. Who here doesn't know anybody whose house or whose office or whose shop has not flooded yet? Whose house has not yet flooded personally? We are now facing an event where there is going to be excess rainfall, erratic rainfall patterns moving forward. We might have to look at flooding as a basic design requirement moving forward, because there is no way we can stop flooding from happening. We have now created an entire world, an entire ecosystem of structures and building and internet and electricity and roadways and metros around us that were built to a weather pattern that doesn't exist anymore. We have now created a world around us that is not in sync with the natural order, that is not in sync with the planetary order. And when it is not in sync, it is going to create some clashes. Those clashes could be flash floods. Those clashes could be how maybe a dam breaks down and we have water everywhere. Those clashes could be such intense heat that all these beautiful glass buildings that I helped create in Hyderabad and Bangalore might start cracking. We had that incident in 2 such buildings in Hyderabad and Bangalore, where the inside temperature and the outside temperature was so extreme that you could see fine cracks appearing on the glass. You might have to redesign how a glass works, or maybe redesign how a building works. That's your job now. You guys are going to be the next set of adults. The problem is definitely not simple. The problem definitely is not something that you can do away with. The problem is going to require a very strong set of individuals, a very strong set of adults to find solutions for. This is the world that you have inherited. The solution is not going back to bhungas and mud houses and wearing animal skin and hunting. We don't have enough animals to hunt, so that's out of question. The solution is going to be how you use the available engineering, ingenuity, intelligence, and resources that is still there to make a better world. The solution is something that you will have to come up with. You have a lot of, in the last 150, 200 years, we have created a lot of knowledge. पढ़ाई बहुत की है इंसानियत ने. We have amassed innumerable resources that can help us guide the way forward. Today in this discussion, I would just like to highlight a few of the thought processes that the great minds of our generation have worked on. Whether that makes sense to you, whether those are the solutions you think will work, is completely up to you. What works and what doesn't work is now the time to test. One of the most beautiful structures that was created in the Kyoto Protocol by all the global leaders is LCA, or is a carbon footprint calculation. Now, carbon footprint calculation basically means that I understand what harm I'm causing to the environment. Now, there are a lot of harms. There are a lot of types of harm that I can cause. For example, let's say I'm having this cup of coffee in a steel mug. I consciously made a choice to use the steel. In my choice of selecting steel to plastic to paper to bone china to, I don't know, to 100 different material, I had to select a few things. First thing, let's say what I chose was, because of me, this steel is going to be used and so much of steel is going to come out of the entire available resources for the planet. This steel, while in its manufacturing process, created a lot of pollution. That pollution then does not become the global pollution, that becomes my pollution. Because of my consumption of that 75 grams of steel, so much pollution has been attributed. So that is my problem, and I need to find a way to fix it. The other part of my pollution could also maybe that the iron ore went from, I don't know, Bihar to Jindal power plant in Hampi, from where it became steel. From there it went to a refinery where it got molded into thin plates, where it went to another metal fabricator where it got molded into a cup. Then it went to 2 or 3 wholesalers and retailers, and then Amazon sold it to me. From here to there, this steel glass or the elements of this steel glass moved everywhere. It uses fuel, petrol, diesel ka kharcha to hua hoga. Whose pollution is that? That is, again, could be my pollution. Those pollutions would be categorized as your scope 2. Scope 3 pollution is something that we do not have, to be honest with you, the guts to tackle. That pollution is where somebody must have designed this glass, somebody must have put the specs, somebody would have designed the engineering, somebody would have done the commissioning of that plant. All of them doing that would have created pollution or created an environmental impact. A part of that environmental should also come back to me, and that is my scope 3. So under this carbon footprint calculation or under this ideology, the world wants us to think about all the pollution or the environmental impact that we are going to create to the world and start taking responsibility of it. So if I am building a mud house and I am building a glass and steel structure, I am going to have an impact to the environment. I am going to have an impact in terms of resources consumed and the pollution generated. And since I am creating that pollution, I am responsible for it. Understanding how much pollution you have created, how much resource consumption you have done, would then become step 1 in telling you how bad this design idea or this design technology is going to be. It is only when we know the impact of our actions that we can determine the value of our actions. So one of the tools that a lot of us in the industry today are discussing is carbon calculation. Abhi kitna paap kiya or how much bad our choices have been is becoming clear. The next step of action that we need to be starting to work on is how do I mitigate that problem? Is planting 5 beautiful trees in my balcony a solution? Is planting 500 trees in my village land a solution? Is stopping from 50,000 trees being cut down for the next project, for the next development a solution? We will now have to understand that how can I not just understand what my pollution or environmental impact is, but how can I offset it? This is going to be much more interesting, much more fun, and much, much more important. How do I offset all my paps? How do I mitigate all the bad that I'm doing? There are a lot of answers. There is no one answer that fits all. In fact, for any and every issue, you may have to look at a multitude of answers. Few answers that all of us know is go for green vehicles, go for electrical bikes and electrical cars. But what will you do when the lithium runs out? What will you do when the cobalt runs out? Go solar. Your PV panels today, as the technology stands, is not going to be sufficient to last more than 10 to 12 years. What happens after 12 years? We are going to be at zero, back at square one. It is also a wonderful time for us to look at solutions from a STEM perspective, from a STEM as in science, technology, engineering, and metallurgy, and maths, sorry. Understanding how solutions can be determined at a basic engineering and scientific level. A lot of solution is grow more greens. One of the most beautiful friends we have in our fight for climate change are everything that is green. Everything that is natural, everything that is plant-based. Plants have few superpowers. One of the obvious superpowers is that it converts carbon dioxide into oxygen. But a more important superpower that the plant has is as it converts this carbon dioxide into oxygen, it absorbs the carbon and it starts growing. So if you look at a branch of a tree or the wood part of any tree, it's almost 75 to 80% pure carbon. If you look at the root structure of a tree, it's all carbon. If you look at leaves, I think around 20 to 25% of it is just carbon. So as a tree starts absorbing all your carbon dioxide and giving out oxygen, it stores all its carbon for itself and it grows. So what you have is one of the cheapest and the most effective and the most time-tested method to absorb all the carbon from the atmosphere. So maybe planting more trees, having green roofs, having green walls, having green floors, having green everywhere might work. Having less is also a solution. Do I need my second car? Can't I still run my work, go to my office in my Activa? Do I really need my second car? Do I really need my second house? Do I really need a big office cabin? Can't me and my team of 7 people sit together a little cramped up, but a little less energy and resource intensive? Using less, working with less is also a good idea we may have to explore. And thank God to COVID, a very horrible thing to say, but all of us have learned to live with less. All of us have learned to manage with slightly smaller pie. As we talk about big solutions, as we talk about an entire building, entire structure, entire industry, we also will have to get into the smaller units of our building. We'll have to start getting into smaller units of our entire lifestyle. If we have to make a brick, what is the best material option? What is the best product option I have for my brick? Do my bricks have to be the red brick, red clay brick that I studied in college? Can I go for cement? Can I go for air incorporated cement blocks? Can I go for gypsum? Can I go for reused material in my wall panels? What material options am I looking at? Here, when we look at material, we already have a system that has been developed by the ISO standard. This is your International Standard Organization has developed a standard or a matrix of measurement. This specific matrix talks about an individual product. Another way to look at product lifestyle assessment is to also call it cradle to cradle study. Let's go back to my coffee mug again. When I look at this coffee mug, from the birth of this coffee mug, that means from where the first iron ore, the first nickel was harvested, to me using it, then me throwing it, and it coming back in the manufacturing cycle. It has an entire life from the birth of its raw material. It goes to processing, it goes to living, it goes to dying, and it goes to coming back in my production cycle. This entire cycle has been studied or needs to be studied. And then we need to understand where all the impact to environment, where all the impact to nature, impact to resources, to impact to energy happens. So we will have to start looking at every product in terms of its life cycle, from its birth to its death and coming back to life again. The term that we commonly use is cradle to cradle. That means from birth to back to birth. These studies are really intense calculations. There are a lot of online tutorials you can find to understand more about it. There are a lot of apps that can help you work out for simple products. That also means that at every aspect of the life of the material, at every aspect from its birth to its product processing, to its finishing, to its transporting, to its use, to its maintenance, I'm trying to understand what happens with it, what all is done to it, what all is done by it. And then I come with a value. So let's say if tomorrow, taking this cradle to cradle calculations ahead, if we have 5 mobile phones, this is a Samsung phone, you have an iPhone, you have a Lenovo phone, you have Nokia phones. If I'm able, as we put in efficiency parameter, or as we put in the other specs as associated to our cell phones, from the screen size to the batteries to the cameras to the zoom to God knows all of our specs, we should be able to have one more value as the C2C, cradle to cradle, or the product life cycle value. That means that in the manufacturing of my phone, it has a save value of 10. Your phone has a save value of 8. Somebody else's phone has a save value of 12. And you then should be able to make a choice that I would like to buy a product that is most efficient from an environment perspective. Doing these calculations are going to be very crucial need of the hour, because many times we are blinded by just what we see. We are blinded that just because I am using a 5-star BEE 5-star rated air condition, it is a environment friendly choice. But it also could be true that the impact that BE 5-star had because of its refrigerant or because of its manufacturing process is much more harmful than what a 3-star would be. So your net savings or your net impact to environment might not be good in terms of the environment at a long run. One of the beautiful examples I have for this is what we do with our lighting. Now, all of us here know that LED lights are very efficient. All of us here know that LED lights will, by using LED lights, we save a lot of energy. And my grandmother had posed this question to me when a few years ago I decided to change all the lights in her house. I said, Dadi, you have such bad efficiency. She had those T5 tube lights, no? Your grandparents' age. She had all those tube lights. I'm saying, Dadi, what is wrong with you? You're using such bad infrastructure. This is not okay. You will have to change this light. Your energy bill will come down and blah, blah, blah. So she went ahead and said, okay, if you want to do that, explain me this. We already have an existing resource. By removing those tube lights and adding new LEDs, what is the net impact this action will have on the environment? And that made me think. Those tube lights today are functioning. Those tube lights today are an operational use. So whatever pollution that was required to generate them has already been spent on. If I stop using that machine, if I stop using that equipment, if I stop using that tube light or that halogen bulb, incandescent bulb, I would in general just waste all the potential usage that machine has. Having said that, and when I shift it with an LED, I'm going to go for energy efficient. So it makes sense that today if I have these high efficiency LEDs and I have these low efficiency light fixtures, my energy saving is instantaneous. So it was very easy maths for me. Ki change kar do, agle mahine se your energy bills will be less. But when you look at the whole picture, when you look at how much energy and how much resource has gone in manufacturing this and that, you would realize that it is more important for us to use that entire product, use the entire tube light for its fullest extent of life. Only then will I be able to validate the efforts and the performance of what has already gone into manufacturing that. So it is not always easy for us to say that just because this product has a higher efficiency, has better performance, it might be a good idea for the entire environment. It might be a good idea for that solution, for that problem, but you may have to wait for your existing material or resources to run out. What I do in my professional capacity is basically this: understanding and making judicious decisions or choices for my clients to make the best out of what they have in front of them. Glass buildings, mud houses. Now, whenever anybody or any of my friends ask me, green building, sustainable building, mud houses, right? You will not go for all your fancy glass and steel structures. But it is important for us to understand that just because something is old or just because something looks as if it has used less energy, mud doesn't consume a lot of energy in forming. Steel does. So steel is bad. We might not be able to have the full scope of what the problem we have created or for the solution that we are working on. Thankfully, green building certification programs across the globe have really wisened up to what the industry standards are, what the industry practices are. This entire system has basically been evolved to make the choice of a designer, to make the choice of an architect easier from an environment terms. It is, look at it as a toolkit where you exactly know, look at it as a tool where you exactly know if I do make choice A, these are the impacts. If I make choice B, these are the impacts. And then you can have an Excel table of all the impacts that you have created and find which is the best solution. Oh, this reminds me of a very interesting situation where we had to study, where we had to convince a residential project to not go for a green roof. This was a villa project in Cochin, where the client wanted to look at the first floor, part of the first floor, to be a green roof, where they will have landscape and the homeowners will have a choice of whatever landscape they want to do. We actually then had to do all of these carbon calculation, these LCA calculations, and help explain to the client that that little bit of 6 inches of soil that you are giving, that green roof that you are providing, will actually be a bad idea for the environment. Let me explain you why. And thank God for this green building programs that you have across the planet that helps us understand and quantify the impact. If I am going to provide 6 inches of wet soil with some amount of weight of my green matter, so if I have a lawn, if I have potted plants, if I have a tree, if I have a banana tree, or if I have a flower tree, that is going to be weight. Think of all of that dead weight on my slab. That means I'll have to over-design my slab. That means I'll have to use more steel. Now, what will I grow in that 6 inches of soil? Nothing much. 6 inches is not enough for growing anything. Anything worthwhile. You will have a couple of flowering plants, maybe one lemon tree if you're in a mood to, and some grass, a lot of grass. A lot of grass means a lot of water consumption. In all of this, I am going to achieve all of that limited environment benefit. I'm going to be using a lot of water. I'm going to be using a lot of steel, a lot of very toxic waterproofing chemicals that need to be continuously applied. For what? For that slightly cooler effect I get below my green roof? If you actually start to measure, and I know that some of you are studying energy simulation softwares, you would realize that the temperature difference would not be more than 2 degrees in an environment like Cochin. 2-degree temperature does not decide whether you're going to switch on your AC or not. So if it is, let's say, 31 degree and it is 29 degrees, you're still going to switch on your AC. So where exactly is the energy efficiency that my green roof is achieving? So in that case, would it be wrong to say that having a green roof, having a vegetated roof on my terrace be a bad idea or a good idea? The maths, the calculations helped us make the decision very clear. This holistic approach, this multi-pronged approach in any solution is what we need to think about. It is important that we understand what impact of our solutions are going to be. We see almost every second building in India right now coming up with glass. I love glass. Glass is beautiful. Glass is sleek. Glass looks awesome. I love glass buildings. But maybe, just maybe, they are not a very good idea in India. Yeah, it brings a lot of daylight. It brings a lot of daylight. India doesn't have a problem of daylight. We are not in Norway where daylight is a rare commodity. God, we have too much of daylight. Why do we need to daylight to come inside? Maybe we will have to start thinking on what materials, what finishes, what aesthetic looks are beautiful today. When we talk about what is beautiful, when we talk about what is present, when we talk about all the natural calamities, you will notice 2 words that come in the forefront. 2 words that kind of revolve the entire discourse on environment adaptation. environment response, and that is adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation means to be able to adjust our living environment, our structures to the current reality. It means to design structures that are going to be exposed to heat waves, worse and worse heat waves moving forward. It means that in June 29th, 28th, Delhi had a temperature that was highest for the last 137 years. It means that we have to now accept that the inside and outside temperature is going to be so drastic that glass might not really be a solution moving forward. We will have to look at a different strategy. Adaptation could also mean that we may have to create spaces where we cover our entire structures in a wall of green that will absorb a lot of the harmful environmental impact that we have. Adaptation could also mean that being a flood-prone house or a flood-prone structure would be the first requirement of every project. My own village last year had floods 8 times. 8 times is a lot of times. It may be high time that a lot of our cities look at flooding as a part and parcel of life. Mitigation is now how do we avoid the problem in the first case? How do we reduce the likelihood of these extreme events or these scary things from happening again and again? When you talk about mitigation is when all your solutionings and all the fancy words and the gizmos will come in place. We will have to ensure that every kilojoule of energy that is used, that is generated for us, is used 100%. Today, our coal-based energy production has a captive efficiency of 40%. Our hydro plants have a captive efficiency of, again, 60 to 65%. Our solar panels have a captive efficiency of 26%, provided you maintain them properly. Maintenance is a different problem. We will now have to ensure that every unit of energy that comes through my wires, that comes through my meter, is used in the most profitable way. That means there is no option for us to be wasteful. There is no option for us to think about having strip lights because I like lights. I like yellow lights and I like blue lights. We don't have the luxury of those choices. We will now have to look at interesting things. Can I use my cooking, which generates a lot of heat waste, to heat my water? Can I use the solar hot water in some formats to cook my food? Can I use the vehicular movements that I have in my basement parking to generate some energy, at least enough energy for me to light my basement lightings? Can I just think of a solution where I don't need a lot of cars to begin with? What if, let's say, I work out with my with the bus authorities in my area where there's a bus stop right nearby, and every hour they'll take me wherever I need to go, so I don't need to have a car of my own. What if I find ways in which all the carbon dioxide that I have generated, because I'm staying in this house, because I'm working in this office, gets absorbed by the plants that are already there? But why do you want to trouble with all our carbon dioxide? Let's plant the plants in our house itself that will absorb all the carbon dioxide. So the other plants have time and efforts to look at other pollution. One human being in 1 year can so much of carbon dioxide that you need 7 to 8 fully grown trees to absorb that carbon dioxide. Can we look at a design solution where we give at least trees per person option in every household? The solutions that we are looking for are not going to be saying that we get a platinum rated building and, oh, my work is done, everything is fine, I have done a good job. It has to be much more than that. Having these solutions in mind, having these problems to start off with, is going to be the basis of what you do in future, of how you tackle your professional issues, how you guys tackle all the challenges that your adult life is going to show you. Sadly, there is no easy answer. The problems that your forefathers, your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, me included, have left you with is dire. You will have to think beyond what we guys have thought of. You will have to think beyond what all the intelligent people before you have thought of and come up with something that works. Because the world as I knew it, the world as my grandparents knew it, is not the world that you guys are going to live in. So go ahead, find solutions. Think out of the box, think beyond the box, think any and every way you want. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for that excellent coverage on sustainable solutions. It is very much relevant to today's scenario. And it was a thought-provoking speech as well. We keep talking about all these sustainability and other things which are happening in day-to-day life, but we don't realize it as such. Like when it hits our future generations only, probably they will think more about it and go forward for more bigger solutions, because most of this thinking is just there in theory and the implementation is very less, on a very lesser percentage. That is what is my comment, and that's what I feel. So now I open up the forum for question and answers. The participants can turn on your mics and ask questions, or you can put it over the public chat also. Yes, someone's asking something. Yeah, Arun Davis. Oh, yeah, Arun, you can also talk. It's okay. Or you
Would
have
like to speak directly?
or you have a network issue or something, Arun? Okay,
Hello.
I'll just read
Ma'am, I
the
audible?
question. Yes, Arun.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. Myself, Arun. I have a small question. So, like the climate change, the environmental condition, or the depletion of all these resources and everything, like, yeah, we all know that we are surpassing the limits of the tolerance and things like that. So, the kind of solutions we come up with, or the kind of solutions which we incorporate into our designs, aren't they manipulating the natural process of succession?
That is not a small question. Yes. Now, it is going to be a little ugly answer, and I'm very sorry for that. If we allow the natural succession or the processes of nature to continue as they are, 426 ppm carbon of CO2 in the atmosphere right now. In the natural process, the planet is going to go so hot, it is going to go so unbearably hot for all life forms. So the natural process ka end goal there would not be a lot of life left. So our job is, if we wish to continue to survive, then our job is to stop this natural process, because in the current trajectory, the natural process wants to kill us. And not just us. It's okay if it kills me or you. I mean, no offense to you, Arun. It is going to kill every life form. One of the most important concepts that you would have to Google here is a wet bulb temperature. Wet bulb temperature basically is the temperature where, if you want to understand what is your wet bulb temperature, take a thermometer, put a little bit of wet cotton on it, and swing it through a thread around 15 to 20 times. Remove the cotton, the wet cotton, and take the temperature. That is the temperature that includes the heat in that specific environment, subtracting what is the moisture content in that area. A wet bulb temperature is a much more accurate version of how we interact with the environment. 33 degrees or 32 degrees is not how we as a human body or as any living body face the environment. We face the environment in a wet bulb temperature, basically because we read the temperature in a wet bulb. That when I say wet bulb, all of us know that if it is hot, we start sweating. What that means is if my temperature is 43 degrees outside, my body will create perspiration. It will cool my surface. And I will not face 43. I will face, let's say, 32. And I'm happy. Now, if you look at any living being as a cow or a donkey or a human body, it has an engine. It has a heart. That heart is at the core of the at the heart of the issue. This engine has a capacity of generating immense amount of heat while it is processing. That's why we have our blood circulation. That's why we perspire. That's where we switch on our fans and ACs. And the body cools down. It maintains a uniform temperature inside. All of this can happen for human beings when the outside wet bulb temperature is 36.5 or lesser. The minute it increases more than 36 degrees centigrade wet bulb, my capacity of perspiring and cooling down stops, and I'm going to get a heat stroke. It is said that if a human body is exposed to 10 hours of a 36.5 degree wet bulb temperature and above, we will just start cooking inside. Hamara chicken tandoori ho jayega. Chicken tandoori nahi, but a pressure cooker. Our intention moving forward is to manipulate the natural processes because the current natural processes don't want us to survive. We have manipulated these natural processes in the last 150 years to such an extent where what is going to happen now is a bad idea. And now we have to stop this bad idea from happening. So all our ingenuity is towards that. All our intelligence, all our efforts should be to stop from the next big flood happening, should be to stop from the next heat wave happening. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have few more questions if I have time.
Sure, please.
Yeah, ma'am. Another question is regarding we planting more trees or more green, having more green roofs and things like that. So my concern here is like all these trees, vegetation and all, it takes many years to reach its effectiveness, maybe to start storing carbon or to start with the carbon sequestration happening and all. So considering that lag which is there, so the process of planting trees or vegetation or adopting more green into our design, to what extent it is a reliable solution, or within how many years we'll be able to see the results of that?
One of my favorite scientists, Guy McPherson, said this: the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. Trees today are our most effective and, to be honest, the only scientific, technically sound solution we have to absorb all the carbon. Bill Gates has invested a lot of money and resources in finding innovative solutions for carbon capture. As of date, there is no technologically viable solution for carbon capture. So you're right. A tree takes almost at least 7 to 10 years to mature and give us the effect of carbon capture that we are looking for. But the question is, if you don't plant the tree today, you're definitely not going to have a solution 10 years later. So today is a good time to plant the tree. There are a lot of studies that are being carried out for carbon capture. As of today, there is no solution yet that can be scaled up. Tumko thoda bahut if you want to do it in a laboratory for at a small scale, then yes, there are a lot of answers. There are a lot of answers from other technologies also that are not relying on carbon capture. But none of these solutions we are able to scale out beyond a small laboratory setting. So planting trees or planting more vegetation is not the best answer, but so far that's the only viable answer that we have.
Okay,
unless you think of something better.
Yes, ma'am. So it takes nearly 7 to 10 years. Okay, ma'am. I have one more.
Roughly it takes 7 to 10 years. If you look at fast growing trees like bamboos, they achieve adulthood in 4 years. If you're talking about big trees like banyan and mangoes and jamuns, it will take 15 years. So 7 to 10 years is a thumb rule most of us guys in the industry consider.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I have one more small doubt. So I've read about soil sequestration. So does this soil sequestration helps in reducing the carbon which is there in the atmospheric condition? For example, if you are having some kind of a green roof, the soil which is part of the green roof, can that help in carbon sequestration? Or if we have some kind of an exposed material like a rammed earth wall or some kind of exposed brick wall, can that help in carbon sequestration?
I think we need to first understand what carbon sequestration really is. Carbon sequestration basically means that through various technologies, through various mechanisms, we are adding more carbon into the soil. Now, what do you mean by adding more carbon into the soil? And I genuinely believe that carbon sequestration or soil sequestration is one of the most important solutions that we have. But let me first try to explain the scientific logic behind this. Carbon is there and we haven't increased the amount of carbon at a planetary level. Jitna pehle tha, let's say 5 million years ago, the same carbon is there today also. We haven't increased the carbon. What we have increased is the capacity of the soil that holds the carbon to the atmosphere. So let's say your carbon, your fuel, your petrol and all that was in those oil rigs really deep into the soil, that has come out, then we have burnt it in our bikes and vehicles and is now in the air. Carbon sequestration or soil sequestration basically says all of that carbon that is there in the atmosphere, I'm going to capture it and put it in the soil again. Let it be below me. Let it not be in the atmosphere is what we are trying to do. When we talk about increasing the carbon content at a chemical level or at a physics level, we are basically saying that some format of this carbon, either in terms of charcoal, either in terms of roots, either in terms of manure, either in terms of organic content, is going to be a part of my soil. This basically will say that if my soil level is, let's say, 0, 0, I put in a lot of mulch, I put in a lot of organic manure, I put in everything, then I start growing trees on top. I increase in, let's say, 2 to 4 years, I increase my soil level from 0, 0 to, let's say, 15 centimeters, around 6 inches. In 2 years, you can increase the carbon value or the soil level. In another 5 years, I get it to 1 feet, 1.5 feet, and I slowly start building my soil. That basically means that 0, 0 level of soil, now I have 2 feet of soil that is rich in carbon that otherwise would have been in oxygen. I have increased the amount of carbon in my soil and subsequently decrease the amount in my atmosphere. This is an excellent idea. This is an excellent solution. This works really well at a ground level. When you bring the same problem at the 50th floor or at the podium level or above anything else that is not ground, the problems, the carbon sequestering may or may not work very well depending on how you treat it. So let's say if I have 6 inches of soil and growing something on it, at 6 inches, I don't have a lot of play to do soil sequestering. But let's say if I have 2 feet, 2.5 feet, 3 feet of a smaller potted tree, I might have the potential of doing that. So how we treat carbon sequestering in a structure in an urban setup is very important.
Ma'am, can the exposed materials helps in doing that? Exposed materials like rammed earth or the exposed bricks?
I'm a little hesitant in using rammed earth or good fertile agricultural soil for construction. As in when we start, we were doing climate change and all of that, we also started adding a lot of pollution. All of this pollution became a part of my rain, became a part of my cloud system and started coming down as acid rain. So my good soil has already started declining. Good earth that we require for our construction purpose for rammed earth has started reducing. I would rather use this soil for producing food and not for making buildings. That is my personal opinion. There is a lot of scientific research that says that I'm wrong. I think that soil is best used for growing food. But when you ask about carbon sequestering or adding more straw and bale and jaggery and all of that, and increasing the volume of my good earth to make rammed structures, it will definitely help. But at a market level, I do not see how much it is going to be useful. But if you're doing, let's say, a smaller structure, or if you're using a very specific program, a specific building typology, then I think it's a very good idea.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
There is a lot of...
Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
There is going to be a lot of discussion that you would face, and you will have to study your own answers for this, on whether the old technology was a good idea and new technology is a bad idea. Saying that Taj Mahal or any of your most famous... Hanji?
No, ma'am, you can go ahead, ma'am. Sorry.
This is going to be a consistent battle you guys will have to face internally and with your friends and colleagues. To say that all old technology is a good idea may not be a right answer. And to say all new technology is a bad idea is also not a good idea. We will have to find a way in which we can marry and find the sweetest spot for ourselves. So maybe doing a mud plaster is a good idea because it helps you in thermal cooling. But spending 1.5 feet, 2 feet of mud walls in a real estate where land is so precious may not be a bad idea. So you may have to look at the solution that captures the best of the old and the best of the new and make new technologies of your own.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for your patience and answering our questions. I also have a small question to you, ma'am. Since we are discussing about the depletion of resources, the climate change and all that, people have started thinking about sustainable solutions. So apart from individual awareness, that is the awareness that is created from an individual level, and also we have these IGBC ratings and all that, green building ratings and stuff. What other options we have to promote sustainability in buildings as a part of architecture, landscaping, even for town planning, etc.? Should we go in for adaptation or updation of bylaws, legislations, or even standards that are to be incorporated at a design level pertaining to sustainability? What is your opinion on that?
I think we are at a stage where individual action is not going to be sufficient at all. We need policy changes. We need strict laws. We need strict government mandates to ensure that every new construction, every new city is way, way, way better than what we have. So policy changes and implementation of those policy changes is going to be very, very crucial. And I hope a lot of you take up this as a serious concern in your education ahead or in your practices when you come into the industry. It is not going to be sufficient to say I provided 100 liters, 200 liters of rainwater harvesting because the law said it and move ahead. Or the law says 100 liters, I'll do 50 liters and I'll manage. We don't have the luxury of doing that. Policy changes are going to be very, very important moving forward. And the only way the policy changes will start is when people like me and you start asking that from the government, start talking to each other and say, no, I think this is a big issue and we need to talk about it. For example, a few of my classmates and seniors from college actually realized that the urban heat island effect in Ahmedabad is killing them. So if you just go, let's say 5 kilometers outside Ahmedabad, the temperature would be, let's say 39, 38. And you're in the peak of the city, the temperature is 44. 6 degrees more. 6 degrees is mazak hai kya? 6 degrees is a difference between hot water and room temperature water. All of that was happening simply because the kind of activities that we were doing at an urban level, our urban planning didn't have any green pockets, our people did not keep those bylanes jo hum chhodte hain for green. They just paved it over and made it into parking. There was just no space for all the heat that a city was generating to be absorbed. That's when UDA, that is Ahmedabad Urban Development Authority, came out with its first proposal in 2016. Just check that, for heat island effect. That was when some 15 to 17 friends came together and they realized they need to do something, and they actually were able to implement an urban heat island effect, where it mandated that Your finished surface cannot be black. It has to be light color. It has to be able to reflect heat. You need to have so many trees per square kilometer that would absorb all the excess heat that we are generating. It made a policy. And today, when you talk about a lot of new people have started implementing that. So policy changes is going to be step one in the long run. And I think it is important that you and me have these discussions.
Yes. Yes, of course, ma'am. Thank you so much. Any more questions from the participants? If not, Dean sir, if there are no more questions, can we close the session, sir? Okay, I think Dean sir has a network issue. But anyways, that was very wonderful and very informative session given by ma'am. Yes, sir. Dean sir.
Yeah, my network is.
Yes, sir, I understand. So I just was about to ask you, shall we conclude the discussion?
Quite
So your voice is breaking.
Absolutely, you can conclude. I have only one point to make to Nupur. You know, when she started with the session, she said, "I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday." We should feel sorry to bother you on a Sunday, Nupur. You know, taking your time on a Sunday, you know, and with the dog wanting, with your pet wanting to take your time, still manage to come back to us. You know, we should be thankful to you. And there's a lot of differential insights from the rigmarole kind of a sustainable concept to a little enlightening newer ideas. You know, starting with an example of wanting to change the lights in your grandma's room. You know, probably it makes our students to rethink every action of theirs. You know, before you could start with such interventions, think twice. You know, that was well. What do you say? You know, changing a light from normal tube light to a LED is a good one, but then, like, you know, underutilizing its lifetime is not a good idea. And every one of us is architects wanting to put those, you know, terrace gardens. And when you say rethink whether 6 inches of soil is good enough to do that kind of but half it is maybe a better solution. So it goes on and on and on, you know. So hopefully the students shared every bit of your dialogue or discussion, particularly the younger ones, you know, the second years and third years. It's not about conceptualizing your ideas and also putting an equal weightage on the choice of materials. That was also well said. So I can go on, but I can simply say that it was a very thought-provocative insight into this newer ideas on the sustainable solutions. I can't thank you enough for a Sunday, but I will leave the session to be concluded with Saranya. And please convey my regards to Mr. Reddy as well and to your entire team to come back week on a week, every Sunday, taking your time off to come back to us is seriously wonderful. I can't thank Vani ma'am enough, you know, to be in touch with you week after week to get the content from you and have the whole thing organized. I'm seriously thankful to your entire committee as well. I will request you all to come in an offline mode, preferably take a day or two off to come to our campus and address the students in a regular offline mode if it hopefully, you know, suits you. But that's all from my side. I will leave it to Sharanya to conclude it. Thank you,
Yes,
ma'am.
sir.
Thank you so much. Sharanya and Vani, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So it's my pleasure to thank every one of the participants, and I thank our architect Nupur for taking her time out on a Sunday and gracing us with her presence. Knowing commitments and engagements, it's a big honor for us that she is a part of this occasion and she has enlightened us with knowledge quite a lot. Thank you, ma'am. And I also would like to stress upon the fact that this event wouldn't have been possible without our persistent efforts of our dean. We thank you, sir, for your guidance. We also thank Professor Vani and Professor Jayapriya Gopinath and her team for organizing this event. We also thank the webinar participants who have shown the enthusiasm in making the event a success. I will now conclude with a special thanks to all faculties, students, and volunteers who have been a part of this event. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll end the meeting.